All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us for our 2 o'clock session on Two-Spirit 101, Colonization and Indigenous Queer Identity. I'd love to welcome Jack to our conference here. And Jack is sorry, my email's going crazy here. My apologies. Jack is a Two-Spirit and Indigenous adoptee from Portland, Oregon. They are an advocate for queer Indigenous rights and support for Indigenous adoptees reconnecting with their culture and building community. I believe in 2020 or 2021, Jack presented at one of our first ICYF conferences. And so I'm so excited to welcome them back to present. And I also want to just give them a huge shout out because they are not feeling the best and still was committed to being here and presenting to our conference. So thank you so much. Welcome. And I will let you have the floor.
Gigtash and Inyak Chugig, Jack Malmstrom. Hello, my name is Jack Malmstrom. I apologize for how I sound. I will periodically be taking some sips of a beverage to keep talking. But yeah, welcome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Now, if everything goes right, we'll be watching a quick video to to kind of introduce you to how this all works. So this is Two-Spirit 101. I've been doing this presentation for tribal communities and social child welfare services for a few years now. Some of it may be stuff you already know. Some of this stuff maybe you're just hearing for the first time. So I hope everyone finds this useful. So we're going to get started. Let's see if it'll let me. There we go. All right. We're going to try watch this video. Hopefully the sound works. If you can't hear it, let me know and I'll tweak some things.
Jack, I can't hear anything.
Okay.
You might have to reshare and then choose to share with audio. There's like a little checkbox.
Ah, there we go. Got it. Okay, let me rewind that.
Major funding for Ingenuity was provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Perfect.
Gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, it feels like they're all boxes and categories that you have to fit into, and they can't change. When I learned about being Two-Spirit, it felt more natural to me. It felt like it acknowledged more than the surface of somebody's identity. I feel like it encompasses also a way of carrying yourself in the world.
What was working before colonization is this practice of passing on of, stories that allowed for people to learn about each other, to appreciate each other, and to live in a way that everyone felt like they were safe and belonged.
For me personally, I wasn't, loud and proud. I was very subdued about it. I never really came out until I left to the city. But when I came back, I'm okay with myself. At one point, gay and lesbians were revered in Navajo culture. It's just that the influence of Christianity really skewed that view of homosexuality. It's a sacredness.
Growing up here in the Bay Area, I saw other LGBT kids, and I couldn't relate to them, or like I wanted to, but I didn't know how. But when I started going to Native boarding schools, and I saw Two-Spirits, and I was like, yeah, okay, I get it now. That's where I belong. That's my place. So I started to come out. I didn't know that I could be an athlete. I didn't know I could be an intellectual. I didn't know that I could embrace all the good things that I knew about me. So my confidence level, it started to peak.
Young people who are just exploring who they are, I want you to remember that there are some tribes out there that didn't even call you a specific gender until you decided what that is. I want you to know that you're empowered and that anything that you may go through, you can overcome. You have the strength, and that you're valuable and you belong here.
For more information about Ingenuity and other ITVS programs, visit ITVS at itvs.org.
Okay, so that was a lovely video on Two-Spirit identity by the animation project Ingenuity. I highly recommend checking them out on YouTube. It's a lot of great Indigenous made animations about culture, identity, and all sorts of things it means to be Native.
Major funding for Ingenuity was provided.
There we go. So I'm going to attempt. There. Okay. So young people have the right to be empowered, educated, and giving a decision-making role in their care of their own lives,
Yes.
as well as yes.
I'm so sorry. There's an echo now when you're talking.
Let me see if I can fix that. Sorry. Just a second. Is there still an echo?
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, somebody wrote, I wonder if you stop sharing and then uncheck that box. If that
Yeah,
will,
let me try.
see if that'll work.
How about now?
Perfect.
Great. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So youth have the right to be empowered and educated about any decisions being made in their own lives, just like the rest of us. They need to be involved in the policies and procedures that are governing the care for all youth in the community, the state, and the nation. This includes giving young people a sustainable voice, and the focus should be towards creating a safe environment and enabling a young person to gain self-sustainability in accordance with their culture and beliefs. Through the eyes of a youth-guided approach, we are aware that there's a continuum of power and choice that young people should have based on their understanding and maturity in this strength-based change process. Youth guided also means that this process would be fun and worthwhile. It's basically like at its core how I've approached youth work over the years. I used to be the youth engagement specialist at the National Indian Child Welfare Association. I've also done local youth work here in Portland for the Native American Youth and Family Center. So, in approaching this, we want to approach youth and anybody else we work with as an equal. They are sentient beings who deserve a right to have a say in how and what impacts their life. So it's important to make sure that they are also kept on board and informed of the processes so they can have a better understanding, which also helps them learn to advocate for themselves when they need. Oh, there we go. So some historical context. The term Two-Spirit was adopted by Native people in the early 1990s in a gathering in Canada. It's being used as an umbrella term for the alternative to Western labels, gay, straight, bi. The other part of it, though, is that Two-Spirit isn't just a identity label. Two-Spirit is a cultural role. So, and we'll get into a little bit more about what that means, but it's not just a label, it is a cultural identity that is and can be specific to one's specific tribal culture. LGBTQ Two-Spirit Native people throughout North America are reviving the Two-Spirit roles and its traditions. They are becoming more prominent in local community events, powwows, cultural events. I know up here in Portland, we have powwow royalty that is also openly Two-Spirit, which is a newer thing in our community. But there is more representation being shown at these events and these gatherings. There are also now national and regional Two-Spirit gatherings. Two-Spirit societies and powwows continue to grow. Two-Spirit organizations have begun to have more of a presence in not regular, but in gay pride parades and non-Indigenous queer celebrations. And they are starting to make their presence known in the non-Native world as well, that we exist and, we have been here since long before any other people or things were here. Two-Spirit, since the beginning, Two-Spirit movement scholarship into traditional identity has always been a goal. A lot of the time, back in the early 90s and even, probably in the last decade or two, a lot of what we had to go on was from a colonist perspective. And I will go into that in this next slide, but things are on the up. So the flag you see on the top here, that is the original Two-Spirit flag that was made in the 1990s. And then now the Two-Spirit pride flag has, has evolved into the flag on the bottom currently. So these are the two Two-Spirit pride flags that we have at the moment. So some historical context. So a majority of tribes recognize third or fourth genders within their culture and communities. Not all tribes are the same, of course. They're not all a monolith, so it can vary if they recognize third and fourth genders, or they don't have gender roles at all. Everything is equal, and so the recognition of that isn't necessarily as intense or really needed in the way their culture operates. For roles that we were given, we were often name givers, medicine people, mediators, adoptive parents, storytellers, warriors, keeper of oral knowledge, all kinds of things. We've held a prominent role in our communities. and continue to. I personally have met so many Two-Spirit people in youth work and the child welfare system and work. And, a lot of us are nurses. Like, we always come from a very caregiving place, and it is a role that we have filled for centuries. In some tribal cultures, Two-Spirits are viewed as being blessed with a masculine and a feminine spirit in one body. So they are able to see the in-between and to mediate between cisgender folks. And again, this isn't every culture that believes we have literally two spirits, but that's kind of where the idea of the name Two-Spirit comes from. The Diné, the Navajo, have a story of man and woman fighting and separating, and it is a Two-Spirit person, a Natle, that goes back and forth and has to mediate for everyone to come back together. And there was some respect in being able to have a person who can see that full 360 view. So that was honored and revered in many communities. On the right here, we have a picture of Wewa, who is a very famous Zuni Two-Spirit woman. She was very prominent in the early 1900s, even got to meet the president, seen more as a bit of a novelty, but also held with some respect. And she did tours and things like that. She was fairly well known until there was more talk about how Wewa wasn't a woman in their eyes, and then it became a source of scandal and kind of blew up on its own. But Wewa is one of our earliest examples that we have of, especially after colonization, of Two-Spirit representation. But again, it is through any documentation we have, really, for the most part, is through a colonizer lens, a secondhand telling of this person's story. So after colonization, there's a lot to go over. So starting with kill the Indian and save the man. And this is the era of boarding schools, the Civilization Fund Act of 1819, and the Indian Relocation Act of 1956. So a big goal with colonization, right, is to disconnect, to spread us out, and to take over the communities. So the idea of kill the Indian and save the man and boarding schools in general were, if we get rid of their savage culture, they can be useful in a service role at the most. Like, we'll try to whitewash them as best we can, but we can only do so much. So let's take them out of their culture. Let's raise them in a Christian environment, and teach them to be maids, housekeepers. We'll teach the men physical labor, manual labor, things of that nature, and make them useful citizens to society. So with the Civilization Fund Act of 1819, this was funding that was given to benevolent societies to assist with the education and civilization process of Indigenous people. Now, benevolent societies is a combination of Christian missions and the federal government making a deal. And at this time, a lot of missions were being built on reservations and Indian territory. And the tactic for this, in early days and on, was they would come to the communities and, see who was a leader, see who was most respected. They would go to the person who seems to be in charge and say, you're going to help us convert your entire tribe. And if you don't, you can do this the easy way or the hard way. If you help us, then we can give you food, medicine, support, whatever it is, the supplies you need, because you need it. If you don't help us, we can make an example out of you. And oftentimes that example was murder. A lot of Two-Spirit folks were murdered in this process because with colonization and Christianity, Christianity brings the gender binary. Homophobia is a learned behavior and is a colonized behavior. Homophobia is not traditional in our communities. It is something I really try to drive home when I work with other tribal clients. That is not our way. With colonization came the gender binary, gender roles, and a lot of cultural chokehold, if you will. So a lot of Two-Spirit folks, when they were also sent to boarding schools, would either be killed or would have it physically beaten out of them and forced into these gender roles that came with it. So with the Civilization Fund Act, this also developed and was the beginning of Indian boarding schools, which were run by the church. And so the goal was you get them young enough, you take the children away, because the adults, it's harder to convert adults, it's harder to change their ways. But if you get them young enough and separate them, then it's much easier to get them to go with the program that you want. So oftentimes children, very young children, like pictured here and even younger, were taken away from their parents, sometimes forcibly by the government, and taken to boarding schools, multiple states over, sometimes as far away as they could, because in the early days they had children running away and coming back to their communities. So they decided, okay, we really need to send them away. So they would be completely separated from the land they knew, the family they knew, and raised in these boarding schools. And then when they come back as young adults, they don't speak the language that their parents speak. Sometimes their parents do not speak English at all, and they only speak English. So it also brought back a lot of disconnect and even trying to reconnect with the community you come from. And all you know is this way that you were raised in these boarding schools and these certain skills that you have that might get you a leg up in the way the situation is right now and in society. So a lot of people end up not coming back to the reservation and coming back to their communities because they have no ties and they have no connection anymore. That has been forcibly severed from a young age. The Indian Relocation Act of 1956 was also another attempt to remove Indigenous people from their cultural lands and their communities. So this was under the guise of, they said, hey, look, we get it. There's not a lot of opportunities where you are, right? Well, we have funding. We can send you up to the big city. We'll set you up with housing, a job, like all of these connections. You'll be good. And then you can find your career or whatever in the big city. It'll be great. And, it was attempting to get the numbers of Indigenous people lower on the reservation so they could attempt to take more land at the time. So a lot of the time, though, these Indigenous families would be uprooted and moved and relocated and find that there was no support. And they would often be stranded in these cities, and sometimes they would end up without a job, without a community, no support. You're in a very white city. You don't have the money to move back. So you're just kind of stuck there. And a lot of families ended up that way, and had to go through quite a bit just to either get back to their communities or find a way to survive. But this was more relocation, not, instead of just moving like the Trail of Tears or mass moving, this was a way to try and incentivize Indigenous folks to leave their lands and to assimilate into the wider culture, but very little support was given to these families to do that. So going into forced conversion and religious indoctrination, we did talk about this a bit, placing children in boarding schools or mission schools, again, at a very young age. I'm talking like toddler age. Punishments for those practicing Native traditions or speaking Native languages. Physical abuse is rampant in these schools. Was rampant, is rampant. That place was a hell. If you were caught speaking your native language, you were beat. If you were singing in your songs, you were beat. Anything that represented savage behavior was beaten out of you, was starved out of you. These places were very much ruled with an iron fist. And so it also kind of connects any association with your culture and creates a trauma connection to it, because anytime you invoke these things came physical, verbal abuse. So the fear to even touch those things can be a very rare, a very real fear. Again, the specific targeting of medicine people and community leaders in order to get the community to do what they want and to go with the program. And again, with colonization comes the gender binary. So with that, also during the first contact, one of the early terms for Two-Spirit people was birdash, which is actually a derogatory term. It comes from the French language and basically translated to like boy child prostitute. The way that both the Spanish and the European settlers viewed Two-Spirit people was from a very distorted lens, and they didn't really seem to try to understand what was really happening here. So it comes from a very biased lens, and in their eyes, it was unnatural. It was, again, savage. It was beastly. It was something that, proves that these people really need to find God and need to, abandon their terrible ways in order to be productive members of society in their eyes. So with all of this comes historical and intergenerational trauma. So the effects of that are homophobia, substance abuse, suicide, internalized depression, and domestic violence. These are all things that we see in our communities as a result of, systematic oppression of your people and culture. And the internalized oppression can really be a big part of that, where we don't talk about, grandma and grandpa, aunts and uncles don't talk about what happened in the boarding schools. They don't want to. We don't talk about hard situation. We know cousin Ray might be a little off, but we don't talk about that. We just try and ignore it, sweep it under the rug, because that's how we've been taught. And these toxic coping behaviors and mechanisms are passed down generationally, even to the generations who didn't go to boarding school. I myself did not go to boarding school. And while I was not raised with my family, I have other siblings and cousins who did not go to boarding school, but had these attitudes passed on through my grandparents, my aunts and uncles who did go to boarding school. So there is a lot of harm and hurt in our communities as a result of this historical and intergenerational trauma. And with the internalized oppression also comes internalized homophobia. We see very high suicide rates in our tribal communities of LGBTQ youth specifically. They are a large chunk of the youth suicide rate in our tribal communities because of the lack of family acceptance and the fear and oftentimes self-hatred that comes with trying to find your own identity and understanding what those things mean. Let me see if I can get my mouse to work. There we go. All right. So the risks of this: 20 to 40% of all homeless youth identify as LGBTQ. 65% of the 400 homeless LGBTQ youth reported having been in child welfare placement at some point in the past. 63.5% of students reported feeling unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation, while 43.9% felt unsafe because of their gender expression. This is from Lambda Legal back in 2015. Oftentimes we do see queer youth being a large chunk of the child welfare system. Again, this is due to family acceptance, homophobia, and even oftentimes when they are in shelters. Shelters also have a reputation of not being completely safe for trans people or for queer people. And so it can be a very turbulent time of finding a place to be your own, a safe place. And oftentimes our youth are kicked out at a very young age, or just do not have a safe environment to really put roots down and have stability. So in the first ever study looking at the rates of violence and the outcomes against LGBTQ Two-Spirit Indian and Alaska Native women, found that 85% have experienced sexual assault and 78% were survivors of physical assault. Of the survivors, 70% reported being sexually assaulted by someone they knew, 63% said by a stranger, and 53% said by both. 38% of these relatives have experienced both sexual and physical assault by strangers and people they knew. Abuse often began in childhood, with 76% reporting they were 18 years or younger and assaulted by someone 5 years or older. The authors have cited other alarming statistics, finding that 1/3 of Two-Spirit men in Canada have been gay bashed. In the US, 45% of gay, bisexual, and Two-Spirit men often reported sexual or physical assault by someone other than a partner, versus only 2% of straight and cis Native men. In a study by the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force in 2011, 46% of Two-Spirit people reported being rejected by family, and 45% suffered family violence. Homelessness is a common issue for Native and transgender people, as well as experiencing discriminations in shelters. 55% reported being harassed by shelter staff, 29% were turned away, and 22% were sexually assaulted by residents or staff. This comes from Centering and Working for Wellness for Two-Spirit Women in the Two-Spirit Journal. Oftentimes, again, homophobia runs rampant within these systems that are supposed to help us. Homophobia and transphobia can run rampant in these spaces. And again, with family rejection comes violence and comes creating an unsafe space for them to be in. So oftentimes they will leave home. Oftentimes they will be kicked out and end up homeless and not really having a way to go. And in the attempts of finding shelters, there are also times where they are turned away for being who they are. And that can also create more risks, and they're seen as easy targets. Again, men and women and Two-Spirit relatives also are at risk if they are more, I hate to use this term, but if they are more visibly queer, if they do not look the way that society thinks they should look, they are also more at risk for physical violence from strangers and gay bashing. We have been seeing this continuously in the news with our trans relatives of, if you do not look a certain way, if you don't pass a certain stranger's look test, then you are open to very real violence, and sometimes that violence ends in murder. Family acceptance is very huge. So many parents can feel conflicted when they learn that their child is queer. They're unsure of how to react. They may feel disappointed, concerned, and just don't know how to help their child. They may respond cautiously since they don't want to encourage it per se, but they also don't want to push their child away. Now, this isn't the case for every family, of course, and as we know, attitudes have been changing over the years vastly. But there are still many families in this country that just have no idea how to handle news like this. And it could be they were raised to believe it is a sin. They were not, their social circle, their family circle, they were not around. They may not know any queer people at all. And, the only reference they have is from, Queer Eye or something. Like, they really have a kind of skewed view of what it means to be gay or lesbian or any of that. And they just aren't really sure how to react or how to approach it. And there can be a lot of confusion with that, or even with parents who are just scared to death of their child now being more of a target and wanting to maybe stifle that a little bit, and hoping that if we can just just kind of change them a little bit, they'll be safer. It's mostly just a lot of misconceptions of and assumptions that can happen with a family when a child comes out to them. So this is a chart from the Family Acceptance Project in 2009. So it's a little old, but I still think it gets the point home of youth who believe they can be a happy adults, openly queer adult. So 92% of them, for extremely accepting families, they believe they can grow to be a happy adult. For those who are very accepting, 77%. I mean, as you can see, as the percentage goes down, the hope in being able to grow into a happy, successful adult dwindles as your family acceptance dwindles. When your community, when those closest to you don't support you and actively try to change you, that brings your internal self-worth down and makes you doubt yourself, and can be very difficult when you know yourself. No one knows you better than you, but you have everyone around you saying, well, you're wrong, and can cause second guessing. And then, well, maybe I am wrong. Maybe it is something, and you start questioning yourself, and that can bring a lot of internal turmoil. And then what hope do I have being successful if I can't even get it right now? If I can't even figure out myself now, what does that look like in the long term? And hope can be a very slim thing sometimes when your community doesn't even accept you, your family doesn't even accept you. So again, family acceptance is such a huge point of this, and through education and working with them, it is possible to make these numbers go up. So everyone feels like they can grow into be a happy, openly queer, successful adult. Oh, it went back for some reason. There we go. So if I can, coming out. So coming out is not a single action. It is a process of coming to terms with being queer and sharing one's identity with those you trust. I am constantly coming out every time I do this presentation. I am Two-Spirit. I use Two-Spirit as a sexual orientation and as gender identity. I am always coming out to every new person I meet for the most part. That will always be a thing. It is a lifelong process. There is no just sending out a blast group email, hey, everybody, I'm queer, and then you're good for the rest of your life. It is a constant thing. And with that comes a level of trust. I am trusting to share a piece of my identity with you, and trusting that you will accept me for who I am, and hoping you will accept me for who I am and understand as best to your ability. And that is how that exchange goes. So again, coming out is a sign of trust. There's a lot of factors that can affect the coming out process. I myself didn't even really put a solid label on it until I was about 22. I used to say I wasn't picky, which was like such a cop out, but it takes some time. It can take time. You can come out when you're 16. You can come out when you're 63. It takes time, and it varies from person to person. So there are definitely other reasons, and many reasons, why someone might be out in some spaces but choose to stay closeted in others. Sharing information about somebody's LGBTQ identity without their permission is sometimes referred to as outing. This can be very harmful and should be avoided. Always check in with the youth or whoever on what they're comfortable with, but especially with the youth. It's not only a risk to their safety, but it can be and is a violation of trust. I am trusting y'all with this information of, hi, I'm Two-Spirit. Thanks for listening. But especially when it comes to youth, this can be oftentimes the first time they're telling somebody, and we want to make that a positive experience and let them know that they are safe and this is a secure, stable place that they can be open about that. So setting the example, what's your pronouns? We can't know the pronouns of people just by looking at them. I go by they, them. You would not have guessed that probably, because of the way our culture sees things. Long hair, maybe a voice that's an octave or two higher normally. But there are many factors that we are raised with in order to identify that is a boy, that is a girl, and we're all raised to believe there are only two genders when really it's a wide, beautiful rainbow spectrum. So it's always best to just try and not assume and just ask. Gender neutral pronouns such as they, them, theirs, and there are others as well are grammatically correct and valid. It's okay to use they, them pronouns. It's encouraged. And it's grammatically correct. Some people don't think it is. And like, what are you talking about? Multiple people? No, no. And in my case, I always say, yes, you are. I'm two spirits. So just use they, them. It works either way. But also what I like to say is I use they until they say. So if I'm unaware of how someone identifies and I don't know their pronouns, then I refer to them as they, them until I can get confirmation from the person of what pronouns they use, until I get a chance to either ask them or just get confirmation somewhere of what pronouns they use. Pronouns may shift or change as someone learns more about their own identity and themselves. I started out as she, her. I moved on to she, they, him. And now I am primarily they, them with a dash of him. It can change over time and can continuously change throughout one's life. So just always be open to that and understanding it's never set in stone. Like most things with our identities, we can ebb and flow. Asking youth what their pronouns are and using them consistently and correctly is a great way to set the example. Be a resource. It's possible some youth will be learning about this for the first time, so make it a good learning opportunity for them. Provide resources, provide links or articles or videos or anything that you have for that may help. Really, just building up your repertoire of things that can be useful to others and also educational for yourself. I have a like a rainbow film list I made many moons ago now, but when my sibling came out, my sibling is 5 years younger than me. When my sibling came out, I gave them that list of movies and documentaries and said, this is what I learned and this is what I found very helpful of queer history and just where we are. And I think this would be helpful for you. And they watched it and they found it was really great and they wanted to know more. And I had some more resources at the time, but sharing resources among everybody, peers, youth, neighbors, whoever, being able to be a resource is a very important thing, and helps encourage others to be resources as well. Correct homophobic behavior you see, not just in front of you, or not just in front of the queer person who is in front of you. Consistently correcting folks who are being homophobic or transphobic. Someone says, I don't get why he acts like that. Oh, actually, they use she, her. She uses she, her pronouns. Gently correcting as best you can. But again, as part of setting the example and being a true ally is not just being an ally when the camera's on you, consistently being an ally, being an accomplice in making sure that any homophobic behavior you see is not tolerated. Using inclusive language. Some folks don't like dude or bro. I'm from Southern California. It is practically in every other sentence I say. It's a miracle I haven't said it now. But there are some folks who don't feel comfortable with dude or bro, and being able to be mindful of that. So when saying, instead of saying, hey guys, how's it going? It's like, hey folks, how are you? Howdy folks. Or hey everyone. There's just being more inclusive in that way can also help. Support youth who come out to you, again, being a resource and making sure that it's a positive situation for them, instead of being like, oh, I knew it, or just keep it calm and be a listening ear more than anything. Do your own research and educate yourself as you can. This is a great symbol you can have in your office, in your lobby. Many schools I've seen use this as well to let them know this is a safe place to be yourself. So connect with local Two-Spirit societies and Native communities in your area. Even just connecting with the local tribes in your area, is possible that they do have some sort of LGBTQ programming in their community, and building partnerships with that is great. Reach out to your tribal communities if you're in an urban setting. See what the Native community out there is up to. Oftentimes obviously there are Two-Spirit folks everywhere. You just gotta know how to find them. So connect with those communities wherever you are, urban or rural. Hit up the neighboring tribes, see what they're doing. And that, building those relationships is very important overall, especially when you're working with tribal youth or anything like that. Just building those communities and saying, hey, what do you got going as far as this demographic goes? And they can also give you more information on, again, because I said this identity can be very tribally specific. So different roles for different folks. So, hey, how does your community view Two-Spirit people? Like, what are your ways in that? And they can be a very good resource for that. There are also online communities, Facebook groups, websites, things of that nature. Attend cultural events, go to powwows. There are Two-Spirit powwows that are starting to pop up more and more. And encourage inclusion. Encourage, again, being a resource, sharing information, collaboration. We love it. It helps make sure people that are on the same page, and just builds a better, happier environment for everybody. So this is a great example. This is from the Hero Project over at Cherokee Nation. They had this in their lobby for Pride Month. And this was a bunch of terms, LGBTQ terms. And so you could look at them, and then, they have some signs and no bullying and all this beautiful stuff here. But for these, you could flip these up, and there's a QR code you can scan that gives you the definition of the term. So this was in their lobby. So if you're waiting to be seen, you can see all this and be like, oh, I wonder what that is, and scan it. And then takes you to a page where it tells you the definition and the definition of the other words as well. So I thought this was a really cool, creative way of doing some kind of community outreach, and also just like representation and being a visible source of information, and also just letting folks know that this is a safe place for people to be themselves. This is also some very beautiful posters from Northwest Area Indian Health Board and the Native Youth Sexual Health Network. These are some great stuff, and they both do amazing work for Two-Spirit folks. So remember, feeling uncomfortable is a necessary part of unlearning oppressive behaviors. Issues related to oppression are everyone's concern, not just the concern of those who are the targets of oppression. And making mistakes is part of learning. So instead of being like, oh, she said, oh, wait, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. I meant they. Just they meant to blah, 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 blah. Don't make it a big thing. Just correct yourself and move on. We all make mistakes. Acknowledge it, apologize, and move on and do better. The best apology is change behavior. And don't forget, humor is good medicine. Don't be afraid to share memes or, crack jokes. Like, humor is a good way that we can connect. And I know that, all of this was some very heavy stuff. Excuse me. But humor is good medicine, and don't be afraid to get in on the jokes. You'll learn more jokes as you go along. So yeah, humor is a good way to break the ice, and it's good for us. Laughing is very good for us. So here are some resources. I will see if there's a better way to get these out to y'all. But if you want to take screenshots at the moment, please feel free. This is just one page, but these are a lot of resources that are child welfare specific, but also tribal specific. There's all kinds of toolkits, and I have some YouTube videos as well. I have the Ingenuity Two-Spirit video there, and some other ones on the definition of Two-Spirit, and interviews with Two-Spirit folks. Also, the Los Angeles LGBT Center, Lambda Legal has a very good toolkit, National Center for Child Welfare Excellence. Here are some hotlines as well that are very useful. Trevor Lifeline, Trans Lifeline, Youth National Talk Line, Crisis Text Line. These are also very helpful. And again, I will see if there's a way I can get this out to the masses, if possible. And Sapa, thank you so much. I will hand it off. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jack. That was awesome. We appreciate you again taking the time to join us today. There were a couple questions and we are running short on time. So before I go to the questions, if you wanted to send that information to me, we can definitely get those resources out. I don't know if you're willing to share the PowerPoint or how you want to do that, but whatever information you're willing to share, you can send it to me and we'll make sure we get it put up on our OTR training page for folks. Okay, so one question was, where or when did the rainbow get chosen for recognition?
So the rainbow dates back to, and it's been a minute since I've had to talk about the rainbow, at least I'm assuming that's for the LGBTQ community. That dates back to the 60s, around the Stonewall riots. It was created by somebody within the community, and each color had a different meaning, which unfortunately it escapes me. But that was, I would say, like mid 60s or so, around when Stonewall happened, was when the rainbow was adopted. And the rainbow flag was created and used as a sign of the movement, and had different virtues for each color and meanings. And yeah, I wish I had more details on that, but that's just something I don't get asked a lot. Sorry.
No problem. And the other one was, if you were interested in sharing that list, I'm not sure what list, but if you're interested in sharing it, you can send it and we'll make sure we get it sent out to everybody.
Yeah, I will share
Movie
that film
list.
list.
Oh, the movie list.
Yeah, I can share that film list. It's a lot of documentaries and also just classics in queer cinema. Some of the documentaries are a little bit outdated because at this time marriage equality was still an ongoing fight, and I was very much heavily involved and engrossed in that. But yeah, I can also add that to the email and make sure that we share that out for y'all.
Great. And then what are you, Jack, currently working?
Currently, my day job is not doing this type of work anymore, unfortunately. But outside of that, I am the current executive director of the Portland Two-Spirit Society. I am also a part of the Uwu Collective, which is a queer trans POC DJ collective. We throw safe parties for POC specific groups in the Portland area. I also assist in a all POC drag show here in Portland as well. I do drag, I DJ. I have also partnered with Howie Echo Hawk in doing the Indigiqueer parties in Seattle. So there's a lot of things. I often come to Seattle for the Indigiqueer celebration. I've been doing that for about 2, maybe 3 years now. So I've been a part of the Indigiqueer Pride celebration down at the waterfront in Seattle. Yeah, so just in my free time now, I've been doing this work. I have since moved on to event coordinating in my day job, but I still try to do this kind of stuff when I can.
That's great. That's great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Any final questions for Jack? There's a lot of thank yous and kudos in the chat for you. So again, we raise our hands to you. Thank you so much for being here and for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, everybody. It's a pleasure.
All right, we're going to take just like a 6-minute break, and then you can transition to the other Zoom link that will close out our conference with our closing keynote. Let's see, Mandy dropped the closing keynote link into the chat. And so we will see everybody over there.